story actually evolves in time and space with the history of the United States of America, the state of Kansas, Kansas City, Kansas, and actually with the history of education. All of this is relevant to those of you who intend to teach children. And remember that you teach children, you don't teach subjects. You teach them. And that's what your job is, that's what your responsibility is. Well, it happened that in the 1950s, this is a little bit of background, in the 1950s, all of 96% of African Americans lived in Kansas City, Kansas on 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, 4th Street, 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street, 8th Street, and I had to stop there. Now, Kansas City, Kansas went way out, a whole lot farther. In fact, the school district itself at that time went as far as 50-something Street, and I don't remember which. But then it became Washington Rural District Schools instead of Kansas City, Kansas public schools. So here we are, all the black community within those 8 blocks. And that's where we were. And what happened was in the 1950s, urban renewal came through the city. And when urban renewal came through, it displaced all the blacks because those were the bad neighborhoods. They needed to tear that stuff down and put up something better. I have a cousin who tells his son, he raised his son in a suburb of Washington, D.C. area. And whenever his son starts to complain, he would just tell him, well, look, I lived in the neighborhood that they tore down in order to build the projects. And that kid could understand what the projects were, because we know what those are even today. And he's thinking, wow, if that neighborhood was that bad. And it was, and if you want to look only at the trappings, because they were neighborhoods, as the others have said, that we really thrived in, because that was their purpose. The schools and churches, etc., working together in order for their children to succeed. Well, the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka case came along and said that there's no such thing as separate but equal. Because if they're separate, they are not equal. And the ones who are getting the short end of the stick are the African American students. And though it was appealed and appealed and appealed, and when they finally said to us, okay, this is it's not going any farther. This is the Supreme Court saying that you cannot continue with separate but equal schools. We had actually anticipated that people would comply with the law. And it did not happen. It just did not happen. And as a result, oh God, by the time that the faculty in the Kansas City, Kansas schools was actually integrated, I was a teacher in the district. The cases against the Kansas City, Kansas school district had started back in 1960. The case was filed in 1960. It was called Downs versus the Board of Education. And they found over and over and over again that the district was gerrymandering or arbitrarily moving the boundary lines for the various schools in order to maintain segregation. As soon as you would move to one of those streets, like I'm going to go back now to 9th Street, when we moved to 9th Street, the boundary line moved to 10th Street. And when we moved to 10th Street, it moved to 11th Street. And all the way to 13th Street, and that was, I think, 1959, which is kind of when the straw broke the camel's back. And people said, no, this cannot continue. And what happened was, the students who had come out of Hawthorne Elementary School as 6th graders were supposed to end up now going to Northwest, which was the white school. Those students had been transferred during the summer to Northeast. Black students. You can't go to Northwest. We're moving the boundary line west one more block, and they could not go. And the parents had not been informed. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Those parents took their children to Northwest Middle School to enroll them, to get them started in school at the beginning of the year. And there they were standing in the office saying, well, your child is not going here. Nobody had told the parents. The parents finally formed a group called the Concerned Citizens of the Hawthorne Northwest District. And when they did that, they got some legal advice, they did their research and found that this was gerrymandering, arbitrarily moving these boundaries for the purpose of maintaining segregated schools. And they appealed, they won, and the district appealed and appealed and appealed and appealed. My brothers were involved in the specific year that they filed the case, and they were, and this is here where you see the Jacksons. That is some of the information that my family had received in terms of even appealing to the United States of America, to the president, to try to get some assistance with what was happening in Kansas City, Kansas. They appealed and appealed until the time came when they could not continue to appeal anymore, and the only choice they had was to integrate schools. And they did racially integrate schools, but they allowed, and I think you saw this, those of you who saw the video, they allowed the criminal, I'm saying that, they allowed the criminal to decide his own punishment. The school district could decide how they're going to fix that. We found you guilty. Now you decide what your punishment ought to be. And as a result, the district decided they would close Northeast Junior, they would close Sumner High School, change it to a magnet school called now Sumner Academy, and that even other elementary schools, in order to try to balance some sanity out of it, even some of the elementary schools, half of your family, the kids in first, second, and third grade went to one school, and the other half of the third, fourth, and fifth graders, or fourth, fifth, and sixth graders, had to go to another school. And so they had all this stupid busing in order to allow that to happen. It just didn't make any sense. And
Question, do we need to have time for questions from the audience?
I thought we had time for questions in the second half.
Because we're going to do reviewing documents.
Oh,
Okay, so
all
we
right.
have questions right here. Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, I had a few, but I guess
Well, let me sit
one of
down.
my questions, when they decided to create Sumner High, was the building already there, and did they need time to
No,
construct?
no.
Because it's a beautiful building.
Well, the original building is what you see in this picture.
Right.
The building that you're referencing as a beautiful building was constructed in 1939.
And opened in 1940.
And opened in 40. This building was constructed between 1904 and 1905. Primarily 1905 and opened in 1906, I believe. The original Sumner. Two different sites.
Yes.
But
But
the
close enough
the
to
site that we were to go to, that Mr. Owens' museum is in, for Sumner, it still functions as a magnet school.
Right.
And
It's on the alumni museum.
Sumner alum. Help me on that. Sumner, yes, ma'am. Okay.
So the original building, is that the one that's closed off because of asbestos?
No.
No.
It's torn down.
Yeah, that no longer exists. The other building is the one, isn't it
On the front.
It's on the front of it.
Yeah,
It's on the
and
front
we,
of the
and
book.
we had it out yesterday. We had the pictures, and we'll have the pictures out today, that you can see the different two buildings, so you can have an opportunity to look.
And that is the building that we graduated from.
Right.
However, it is now the building that Sumner Academy of Arts and Science graduates from.
So it's just systematically carrying on the same curriculum as the original Sumner did. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all for coming, first of all. It's one thing to hear about something in a book and to meet you all, so thank you. I'm curious what your comments are about society today in terms of schooling for African Americans in general, because in Chicago, like everywhere else, there's de facto segregation happening, and how, going through the experience at Sumner, do you have ideas about how to make education, how to bring more equity in education, because there's so much has to do with housing and neighborhoods and urban renewal and what to do when that it has such a stronghold on our society. Where you live determines what kind of school you're going to go to.
I'll try and respond, at least my opinion. And I believe in addressing things straight on. Looking back at Sumner, first I'm glad that Sumner was created. I don't think that I would have received the quality of education that I attended, say, at Wyandotte High School that I received at Sumner, merely because of the teachers and the administrators. There are things that you can learn other than from books and the community. I might say that I'm not pessimistic, but the housing, I think, until this country looks squarely at the truth and look at some moral obligations, and I might add that the morals may have changed, look like they change every day. Things that were that's acceptable in 2017, June 22nd, 2017 would have been reprehensible when I was coming along. Until we look squarely at what is really going on, look honestly at ourselves, look at morality, it'll get worse. It's worse, I might say this, and many people don't agree. It's worse now, in 2017, than it was when I left Ashdown, Arkansas in 1946.
I wanted to be a teacher, or I thought I wanted to be a teacher when I was in high school, because I thought they were the epitome of success. But at any rate, I got an opportunity to substitute teach for a couple of years, and education had changed tremendously. We got a very well-rounded education. Now the emphasis is strictly on, I think it's science and math. I'm sitting in a class, and I've got students, and they can't. These are juniors, and some of them are seniors, and they can't write a complete sentence. You know, punctuation doesn't exist. They don't know a verb from an adverb or a noun. They don't teach those things apparently anymore. You know, so I cringe at that. Education has changed, and I don't think it's always been for the better, because our students are actually suffering. And the teachers that we had, they cared that we learned. I got an opportunity to look at one of my teachers' paycheck, and I said, "No, they don't make that much money." You know, so it was because they cared about what they were doing. You know, we had teachers that would take us home with them, and groups of us and stuff. We'd tear up their furniture. They just bring it up to the woodwork class and prepare it. And you know, but they were mentors. In other words, is what we had. So they educated us and they mentored us.
Let's make one other comment about this. To me, education began to change at the end of World War II. I think originally, education in this country is relatively new compared to some of the other, quotation marks, developed countries. And I think education at one time was designed to adapt you to the environment in which you were living. And I think the schools taught you how to learn. At the end of World War II, on over into probably the mid-50s, it changed for everybody, and it taught you what to learn. So we're not able to think through things. I think that's the major difference in education. We're being taught, our children are being taught what to learn. I used to say that the teachers, many of the teachers now were taught what to learn, not how to learn. When I graduated from college, and I was into the military and had spent 2 years at junior college, my father was so happy. He he had brothers and sisters. We were not the first one to graduate in our family, but he said, son, the only thing that that degree is supposed to do for you is to give you an organized way to learn how to learn. That's all it's supposed to do. That was so profound.
Probably an oversimplification in response to your question, but you all as teachers are an integral part of that three-legged stool that Chester talked about. Family, school, church. If any one of those is missing from a three-legged stool, the stool cannot support itself. It cannot stand. So today, I'm afraid we've got an environment where various pieces of that three-legged stool are deficient. That's the problem, not the solution. But really, it does take the whole village. And the benefit that we had coming out of the neighborhood that Sumner High School was in is that the whole village was there to support us. It really was. Family, school, and church. We need to get back to that. And I think that's another way of saying I'm agreeing with Chester 100%. We need some way to get back to that. But it is a very complex and difficult thing to do. A lot of moving parts in that whole scenario.
It is very difficult, and I think all three of those legs are necessary. I'm going to give you my simplistic way, and you'll see when I name those things that they are not simple at all, that we can have three legs to support those three legs that will support our children in school. And the first leg of that is legislation. We must have laws that we obey. I have questions about allowing anything that